Deebo Samuel has finally broken his silence on some of the rumors that have come out since his trade request. Plus, Talanoa Hufanga posted something on his Instagram about possibly coming back to the 49ers. I don't know if it's good or bad. We'll talk about it all on today's Gold Standard podcast brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Diggers podcast on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. She's Michelle Majuk. It's Valentine's Day. How are you, Michelle?
Hey, I'm doing good. I have my mimosa, which it sounds like you might be a few mimosas deep with all your stumbling in that intro.
That was the worst cold open I've ever done. And I'm sitting here.
I know you're normally so good at it, but I was like, stumble master over there.
Yep. Thank you for that. Nobody on the podcast would have known about that, but I'm really glad you brought it up so everyone is aware. You can go check out the YouTube video if you want to see me make a fool out of myself. On today's show, we're going to talk about Deebo Samuel's tweets that he has since deleted, pushing back on some of the criticism that has come out against him. We're going to talk about Talanoa Hufanga posting something on Instagram that might make a lot of 49er fans happy, but might make me sad. I'm not really sure. We'll talk it out. Plus, there was an interesting little article on Niners Nation about a possible free agent target at a huge area of need for the 49ers that when I sent it to you, Michelle, you actually really liked, which I feel like most of the stuff when it comes to like acquisitions, you poo-poo. I feel like you're very quick to dismiss.
I liked the article. I think he made a lot of great arguments for it and good cases. So that's what I liked about it. I don't know if it would be a good signing, but we'll talk about that.
Yes, we will. But let's start with the Deebo Samuel stuff. As you know, there's been a lot of stuff coming out about Deebo, as generally happens when you sort of see a player and a team and their relationship is at the end of its rope. But one of the main things that came out was something that Tim Kawakami said on his 49ers Plus Minus podcast. If you didn't hear it, here it is.
Deebo, in their opinion, got too heavy last year and it was 20 pounds overweight at the end. That's what I was told, 20 pounds overweight at the end. He did get dinged up. There probably were reasons for it. I think there is some opinion in the 49ers that they do not need to be in the Deebo business anymore.
Not shocking. Any of us that saw Deebo play last year and saw what he looked like, frankly, at the end of the last year would say this isn't surprising. Well, yesterday, Deebo Samuel sort of responded to those thoughts. Somebody had quote tweeted Kawakami saying that, or somebody had posted the quote of him, and Deebo responded. Let me throw it up on the screen. It might be hard to see. He's actually deleted this already, but he said, he put the smiling face emoji and said, people make up anything in their head. Trust me, keep that same energy. And look, I get why he doesn't like that this stuff is out there, Michelle, but this is not a subjective thing, right? Like either Deebo was overweight last year by the end of it or he wasn't. And I think it's pretty obvious based on how he looked and how he played, more importantly, that he wasn't in shape.
Listen, he averaged the fewest yards per route run in his career at 1.6. To compare that, Puka Nacua averaged 3.6 yards per route run this year. 3.6 to Deebo's 1.6. Now, Puka was crazy. He led the league. But still, his Deebo's separation of 3.1 yards per target was his lowest of his career. He averaged his miles per hour speed at target was 9.96. It was at 10.57 in 2023. So that dropped down significantly. His tight window percentage, he was targeted at a tight window, 21% of his targets this year, by far his career high. Like something was happening where he's never been a great separator, but he was even worse this year. His EPA per target was his lowest of his career by far, 0.05. So like, yeah, something happened here, Deebo. Either you fell off skill-wise or you're heavy and you're playing at too heavy of a weight.
The strange thing is like he doesn't seem willing to want to face the reality of what happened. And like maybe there's something that occurred that we don't know about. I'm not saying that's not possible, but like even in an interview he did with Kay Adams, he was talking about, well, you know, the opportunities weren't what I thought they were going to be. Like he still thinks the issue was he wasn't getting targeted enough. That's just not true. We can look at the numbers. Like we have all the information. He was getting targeted just as much. He just wasn't doing anything with those targets. And all of this is to say, Michelle, that I mean, his trade value was already low, and I feel like it's just getting lower because what he's saying, he's putting out there is everything is fine. I don't need to change any of that. And if I was another team, I'm like, why am I going to give up anything to get this guy?
No, he doesn't seem like anything is his fault. I mean, he learns from the master, right? And Kyle Shanahan, he's learned not to take accountability whatsoever. But yeah, you don't want to hear him saying that. And also, it's so shocking his weight this year because I feel like they were all praising him this offseason. Like, oh, he looks so skinny. So did this all just come on after, he got sick, he had the pneumonia? And because I don't know, it's hard to tell people's weights with all their gear on, right? But the latest we saw him at Media Row, it looked like he put on a significant amount of weight since we saw him earlier this year.
And that's always been a thing with Deebo Samuel. It's always been a battle that he has had to fight. They were told about that when they were going to draft him, basically, that, hey, he's an explosive player. He can do rare things with the ball in his hands, but this is something that you're going to have to monitor. And they knew it. And by the way, if you're watching on the stream, you can see the picture of Deebo in the Eagles jersey. But they were on it when he first got there. When Wes Welker was the wide receivers coach, he would run with Wes Welker before practice. He would practice. They would run after practice every day. Like, they were doing everything they could to try and keep his weight down. Originally, they wanted him at 212. He could not get to 212. Then they put it at 220, and he even had trouble with that. So, like, this is nothing new with Deebo Samuel. He would come into camp out of shape pretty much like every other season. And so none of this should be shocking. Like, Deebo can push back on it all he wants, but the reality is the reality. And what has happened is it's always been an issue for him. So I think more and more, Michelle, this is just going to be a release. It's going to be a post-June 1 designation. They're going to cut him. They will spread the cap hit over 2 years, and that's just going to be the end of it.
You don't think they can get a trade for him for a 6th or 7th rounder? I do.
But here's the question. So what it comes down to is, would you rather have that draft pick, whatever it may be, and take on the full salary cap hit this year? Or would you rather not have that draft pick, but split the cap hit out over 2 years and thus have more to spend this season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what they're going to have to depend on. Again, this is why they need to get the Purdy deal done so they could just look at how everything lays out for them in terms of contracts and where they need their more money spent in certain years. But just I wanted to do one more note here on Deebo Samuel about how he really is just not providing any benefit for the team. So EPA looks at expected points added, right, when you're touching the ball. So EPA per target for Deebo, it was at 0.05. So he's adding 0.05 per target EPA, expected points added, every target he's getting this year. By far, like I said, his lowest of his career. But these are the only guys that were worse than him this year. Elijah Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson, Latavian Wicks, Michael Pittman, Xavier Legette, Cooper Kupp at his old age, Amari Cooper, Ray McLeod. Those are the guys that offered less to their teams per target and expected points added among wide receivers with 75 targets this year. So like, he really was adding nothing to this team when they were giving him the opportunities. So he could say, I wanted more targets. Well, your targets are not helping us at all.
Targets are earned, and you weren't earning them, quite frankly.
Can we also talk about how he's had only 8 end zone targets in his career, right? Which is low.
In his
career, only has caught one of them. 8 end zone since 2020. That's when he started, or since 2020. He's had 8.
This is rookie year.
Okay. He had 8 end zone targets since 2020 and only caught one of them.
Because he can't get open when it gets tight. He can't get open. So that, I mean, when you first said it, I was like, wow, how can that be? But then as I think it through a little bit, it's like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. The targets are earned, man, and you didn't earn them. I've seen this comment a lot. I'll read this one from Randy Galella, YouTube channel member. Thank you, Randy, and to all our YouTube channel members. Appreciate you. Randy says, why would you leak bad stuff about someone you want to trade? I think they want to keep him. I don't think this is the 49ers leaking it. I think this is stuff that 49ers beat writers have been hearing for a while. Actually, there's a longer version of the Tim Kawakami audio clip that I played where he says, like, hey, I've heard this for a while and I've held it because I didn't know when to come out with it, basically. So, like, they've known about this. Again, this is not like a shocking, blockbuster bombshell report. They've known about this. And I think that now, because everybody senses that the relationship is over, they're coming out with it. I don't think this is the 49ers leaking it because, like you said, Randy and others in the chat, this doesn't help the trade value if you were actually looking to get something for Deebo.
No, it doesn't help the trade value, and I doubt but what were they going to do at this point, right? It's not like he's been out and about in the media's presence, right? And maybe it was the outfit he was wearing, but I'm sorry, he looked large, and who cares? Like, I'm not trying to body shame anyone, but when it comes to your job, it matters what you weigh and how in shape you are to be a great wide receiver, right? And to do what he needs to do. So when you're seeing a guy that looks much heavier than he has in the near past, that's going to be brought up. And I think that's a fair thing to be brought up.
It's not shaming him for the way he looks. It's shaming him because it impacts his performance on the field. If he weighed 400 pounds and was the Deebo we saw in 2021, nobody would care. It's the fact that the production has fallen off so steeply. Nick Eller, another YouTube channel member, says, Michelle, how many handoffs did Deebo get in the red zone? And yeah, that's fair. Like, I'm sure, some of the red zone numbers are a little skewed because he does run the ball on the ground. But if he could get open, he would get more targets in the red zone. And he just doesn't. He doesn't. It's so clear. He was getting locked up by linebackers in the Super Bowl, for God's sakes. It's over. It has to be over. It's clearly run its course. And I talked about this on the Bleacher Report stream I did on Wednesday that unfortunately you were under the weather for, so you didn't join me. But I think the offense is going to be better for it. And I don't think it's something that Kyle Shanahan wants to do. I think he loves Deebo. I read the Mike Silver book all about Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh and LaFleur and McVay and, all those guys. And at one point, Kyle Shanahan said to Deebo Samuel in a team meeting, "You're the best football player I've ever been around," which I think is crazy because he literally coached Julio Jones at one point. But that's how much Kyle loves Deebo. So I don't think any of this is what Kyle Shanahan wants, but I still think the offense could be better for it. And the situation that I related to, Michelle, was when I got laid off from NBC and from SB Nation. That scared the hell out of me. The last thing I wanted was to lose my job. If you had told me then that, I was going to get laid off, I would have fought tooth and nail to prevent it. I would have taken a salary reduction, anything. It scared the hell out of me. But now I'm here. I have the podcast still. We're independent. I have my own company now. Like, I'm better off now than I was then. I'm working from home, but I would never have chosen to do that. It was forced upon me by circumstance. And I think the 49ers offense could end up in a better situation without Deebo Samuel, even though Kyle Shanahan would never actually choose it himself.
Yeah, I think if they get rid of Deebo, it's going to force Kyle Shanahan to change up his system just a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be completely changed. I think overall we can all agree he's a good play caller. He has a good system, but the way he's utilizing Deebo, it's not working anymore. Defenses have caught on to Deebo and how they use him. So this is no longer working. And I don't think Kyle Shanahan is too stubborn and Deebo's in his head and he's like, I gotta, get Deebo the ball. I gotta get Deebo the ball, or he can do this. And there's just so much trust in him that just get rid of him and force him to put other people on that field. And they'll do more with the ball in their hands.
My wife just made a surprise appearance on the stream for everybody watching on YouTube.
Hi, Erin.
She didn't know we were live and I didn't tell her. So that's going to be on the internet for all time. I'm just really scoring points on this Valentine's Day. Benali says, watching A.J. Brown catch the same touchdown in the Super Bowl Deebo couldn't win on McDuffie reopened some old wounds. I'm not going to lie. I just watched the Super Bowl highlights yesterday. Not the highlights. I watched the condensed game. It was maddening how many times they went to Deebo Samuel, even with a messed up hamstring in the game. Remember, he pulled his hamstring and he collapsed on the ground because he was in pain. And they're giving him end arounds after that. It's like, my God, what are we doing here? So
I really think it'll be better for Kyle Shanahan in this offense without Deebo.
And I was listening to an interview that Matt Barrows did on KMBR yesterday. And he actually said that he thinks that Jacob Cowing is sort of the Deebo Samuel understudy, that Jacob Cowing is going to be the guy that does the ends arounds and stuff like that. That's great if he can incorporate some of those things. But what I don't want the 49ers to do, Michelle, is to be like, okay, we got to get another guy to do all the Deebo stuff. No, just go away from the Deebo stuff.
Yeah.
It had its moment. It's cool. It's like, I don't know. I can't think of a good analogy, but it's over. It had its moment. It's gone now. We don't need to do that. It's you don't need to have this package in the playbook or whatever. Just do something new.
Yeah, I don't want them to just try to find a replacement for Deebo. Like, I don't think that's the whole issue, right? Like, Deebo was still getting yards after catch. It wasn't as great. Like, he plays his role fine, I guess. It definitely is from what he was, right? It's definitely regressed, but like he plays a Deebo Samuel role fine, right? Like, the point is that role's not working anymore. And yes, Deebo has gotten a little bit worse. He's gotten a little bit slower. But the fact is, defenses have caught on, and he cannot separate down the field. So that the role that he plays just isn't working anymore, and he can't do anything else. So that's why you need to get rid of him. I don't think replacing someone to play the Deebo Samuel role is going to make it any better.
Maybe it would if whoever they got, if it's Jacob Cowing, was a true receiving threat. Like maybe that would help restore some of the, effectiveness. I don't know. I can't make that argument. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But I mean, you still have Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, right there, that's 2 first-team All-Pros, and then Brandon Ayuk was a second-team All-Pro in his career. And then your fourth option is Juwan Jennings, who's a solid contributor. Like, you still have so much talent on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to be just fine. You'll be just fine. And I really hope that it happens because I think it's sort of forcing change that the 49ers don't really seem willing to do themselves, but it'll ultimately be good for them. It's like forcing your kid to eat the vegetables.
And there's like, if they want to fill the role for Deebo, again, not fill the role, but like add another wide receiver. Let's say they don't feel comfortable just going in with Pearsall and Ayuk coming off the ACL. Like, there's cheaper guys in free agency they can add. Like, you don't have to go for a stud like a T. Higgins. You don't have to pay as much as you've been paying Deebo. There's got like Darius Slayton, I think, is a very good wide receiver, and he's going to be pretty cheap. Like, there's guys you can add. Nick Westbrook-Akine, who was like a touchdown monster. Like, you don't need someone that's incredible. When you drafted Pearsall in the first round, you're expecting him to step up. When you have Brandon Ayuk, who you just paid, when you have George Kittle, when you have Christian McCaffrey, you just need pieces. And I don't think you need to be worried about how much you're spending on Deebo, if he's going to try this game, is he going to cry because he's not getting enough targets? Is he going to actually try? Like, there's too much happening there when you can just go get someone else with all the other pieces you have in offense.
We're in lockstep on this one, not surprisingly. Speaking of pieces you can go and get, Michelle, I saw this article by Kyle Posey on Niners Nation, and I thought it was interesting. And it was all about a former first-round pick for the defensive line that the 49ers could go out and get. And I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize. But the pick is Joe Tryon-Shoyinka from Tampa Bay, and of course that ad pops up right when I'm trying to scroll down. I know that this was somebody that the 49ers really wanted during the draft. I think that I was hearing that he was like one of the targets that they really wanted. And the more I read this article from KP, the more he kind of convinced me that, like, damn, we should go get this guy.
There's a lot of guys like this where that can help your team, but because they were drafted early by a certain team, like, they seem like huge busts to them, right? And the fan base is soured on them because they were drafted in the first round and they haven't hit the potential. And that's definitely the case with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Like, he has not been at all worth the first round pick. It doesn't mean that he can't be good with another team. I think it's kind of like the Chase Young thing, right? Chase Young, huge bust compared to where he was drafted. But I do think he's a good, solid role player for a team. And I think he was good for the 49ers. Those are the type of players they need to add that, they have the talent and they were bust compared to where they were drafted, but they still could be good role players. And I think that's what you could get out of a guy like Joe Tryon. I don't want to say his name again.
Tryon-Shoyinka. I think that's how you said. Apologies if it's not. First of all, he played high school football, basketball, and baseball. So, like, super, super athletic. Love that. There's a lot of good stuff about his just freak athleticism coming out of the draft. But the more I read the article, and maybe I should put a link to it in the description, I would highly recommend go and check it out. Levante David said there was a lot on Joe's plate. People may not know, but he had to do a lot of different things for us just because you had to get him on the field. A guy like that, he played a lot of different positions for us, even some stand-up linebacker at times. I like a versatile guy like that Robert Saleh can move around and do some different things. And what do we always say about Chris Kocurek, right? Oh, he's a guy, he can rehab, people and all that. Well, this would be a perfect guy to rehab, a guy that has the physical talent to be a first-round pick. Bring him in, put him with Nick Bosa. This is the guy you're supposed to be able to coach up and get more out of, who I don't think is going to break the bank in terms of what he'll get on the open market.
And there's a lot of guys like this out there that were first, second round picks that haven't lived up to potential that they can go grab and see if they can fix them up, and use them as role players. And not only Joe Tryon, I can't say it again, Joe Tryon Shoyinka, but there's also Aziz Ajulari, Joseph Asai. You got Patrick Jones. There's a bunch of guys that have not lived up to the potential. Peyton Turner from the Saints, first round pick a handful of years ago. There's guys out there that they can sign on the cheap if they felt like they liked them coming out of the draft, right? Like if they thought they were good prospects and they say they'll be better in my system, then there's hope there. And I think those are the guys they need to bring in. There are some older guys like Dante Fowler Jr., who had a great year with the Commanders this year. Maybe they go super old with Brandon Graham to try to fix up their run defense, but I think the young route is kind of the way to go.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Graham is going to call it a career. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I could be wrong about this, but I think he probably is. I saw this comment from Andre Garibay, YouTube channel member, says he's an upgrade over what we have now, which is and it sounds stupid, but is he better than what we have? Yes. Well, then maybe we should add him to the team, just get a bunch of good guys. It sounds like a good strategy. Oscar Alfaro says, don't sign players that play next to all pros, cough, cough, Javon Hargrave, cough, cough. Here's the difference, Oscar. They're not going to pay Joe Tryon Shoyinka what they paid Javon Hargrave. That's the difference. And you're not asking Joe Tryon Shoyinka to be, your number one pass rushing guy like they were. Hargrave was brought in. It's all right, fix the run defense, dominate as a pass rusher. And, there we go. Our defensive line is good. This is a much different type of signing. And so that's why it doesn't scare me as much as something that you're kind of talking about.
Now, Matthew Judon might come at a discount with his injury this season. And he, I feel like he's been kind of a head case with the Patriots, but I think he just wanted out of the Patriots organization because they were so bad. Judon's a great pass rusher now, but I do think they need to also bring in guys that they can be both a good run defender and pass rusher. And I know you're way more worried about edge rusher. I'm way more worried about the interior defensive line. And I think that's kind of BJ Hill's out there. I think he would be a great addition in the middle of the offensive line, or get a big boy that could get you some sacks, but also be a good run defender. And that's BJ Hill, maybe Jaron Reed at a lower cost there possibly. But I do think they need to focus on interior defensive line this offseason more than edge. Get the cheap guys that you could try to fix up on edge, maybe, but spend up on interior defensive line.
Benali says, looking at the D line, by the way, if I'm saying your name wrong, please let me know in the chat because I want to make sure I get that right. Says, looking at the D line these last few years, is Chris Kocurek potential still riding the reputation from 2019? Yeah, I think he is. They made a big deal out of bringing him in. They made a big deal about how he's so highly paid and all this stuff. And, at some point, we got to get more. It can't just be Nick Bosa and the Funky Bunch. We need you to coach up. If that's your whole thing, is that you're supposed to be able to get more juice from the orange than anybody else, where is it? I haven't really seen it anywhere else. So I do think he's more sizzle than steak at this point.
Maybe y'all should call up Cam Hayward. Or call up the Steelers for Cam Hayward.
Call up somebody, man. It's bad. I saw a clip of LaShawn McCoy saying he sat next to Fred Warner at the NFL Honors Show, and he asked him what was up with the defense, and apparently Fred Warner's answer was, we were bad, man. Bad.
I mean, they were. The stats weren't the worst thing ever, but just watching them and the missed tackles that they would just not force like they normally did, it was brutal. I mean, maybe I don't want to put it all on the coaching. I do think the players did not play up to their potential this year either.
It's both. That's why it was so bad. If it was just one, I feel like they might have been able to overcome it. Remember, they didn't have Randy Gregory or Chase Young on the roster when they started last year. They traded for them during the season, and because they realized we don't have the players, so then they added the players.
I do feel like they should have kept Chase Young.
I think that they were kind of dude, you didn't put a lot of effort in the NFC Championship game. Like, what the hell? Now, in the Super Bowl, he had a good Super Bowl. I think he had a sack, and he played well. But I think
I think Chase Young would have been a nice, cheaper. Now, is he available again this year? I don't think so.
I actually don't know.
Where is he? Oh, yeah, he is a free agent again. If he would be open to it, I think Chase Young, I get it. Like, I feel like everyone just hates on him because he's did not at all even come close to living up to the number 2 overall pick. And he was, I mean, he would have been number 1 overall if it wasn't for, the quarterback going first. And I do think that Chase Young overall has been a disappointment, but a really good role player.
Well, he did win Defensive Rookie of the Year, and then he had that horrible injury. So maybe that has contributed to it. But I would not rule it out. I'd be open to bringing him back. Again, they need so much help. Like, you can't be turning your nose away at players just because maybe they're not perfect. They're all going to have some warts. You don't hit free agency unless you have a couple warts. The question you have to ask is, are they super expensive and do they make us better? And if you get the right combination of those answers, you should absolutely do it. I saw a comment that I wanted to get to. Oh, here it is. Nick Eller. Sign and trade for Trey Hendrickson, draft Walter Nolan, back on top. I have been on the Trey Hendrickson could be a possibility for the 49ers. Here's the thing. Cincinnati doesn't pay anybody. Joe Burrow has told everybody at the Super Bowl, multiple interviews, we got to pay our guys. We got to pay our guys. Jamar Chase wants a new deal. T. Higgins, we know, wants a new deal. Trey Hendrickson wants a new deal. I guarantee you Cincinnati's not paying all of those guys. I would absolutely look into it. I like Trey Hendrickson.
With how bad their defense was, I feel like you would have to pay so much to get Trey Hendrickson from them because they're still, with Joe Burrow, they're always Super Bowl contenders, right? So they're not going to just say, oh, well, we're not going to win with him anyways. They're like, we need him. He's their only good piece. So I don't want to go spend a ton of draft capital and money on the defensive line as an edge rusher. Like, I don't think you need another elite. Like, Nick Bosa should be enough. If you're going to pay him what he's getting paid, yes, you need role players, but you shouldn't need 2 elite 30 million plus edge rushers a year. Like, I just don't think that's the way to win. The way to win is depth and good role players to go with your elite guys. And we're already so top heavy. You're just trying to make it more top heavy. I don't want it to get any more top heavy.
I would rather have elite players than a bunch of mid guys, though.
It hasn't worked. The top heavy approach has yet to work.
But who's the other elite pass rusher that they've paired with Nick Bosa? The only other one was D Ford, and it did work. They were awesome, and they got all the way to the friggin' Super Bowl. Since then, it's just been a bunch of.
But was D Ford paid a lot of money? Did they have to use a ton of capital to get him?
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
They had to pay him. They did.
If they can find a elite edge, I'm not going to be upset if they find an elite edge rusher at the 11th overall pick. Right? I'm saying if you have to use that 11th overall pick to trade for a guy, plus pay him $35 million a year, I just don't think that's the winning formula. When you already are paying Nick Bosa what you are, like, I don't think like you're just going to destroy your opportunity at depth so much more. And this team is lacking depth like no other.
Nick Elhert says, Michelle, it's the Bengals. They have a history of bad decisions.
I know.
And they have a history of cheapness too. Don't ever underestimate Mike Brown's cheapness over there in Cincinnati. It's a definite thing. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that are out there in terms of pass rushers, right? Myles Garrett has demanded a trade. He was at Super Week telling everybody why. Trey Hendrickson wants a new deal. He could potentially be available. Max Crosby, I think it was Ian Rappaport, just wrote a column about how Max Crosby could potentially welcome a deal to a contender. I would freaking love to pair Max Crosby with Nick Bosa. Oh my goodness, that would be phenomenal. When I talked to Max Crosby at last year's Super Bowl, he had glowing things to say about Nick Bosa. I would love to pair those two together.
Sure.
Even if
we see like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa together. Yeah, it made for a pretty solid defense, I guess. But again, they're lacking depth, and it's a big reason why they can't win a playoff game. Like, I just don't think paying all this money for a couple elite edge rushers is going to fix the problem.
We will see which route the 49ers choose to go. I mean, I know a lot of people favor the draft, and it's like, yeah, if you could tell me that all the guys they drafted were going to be good, I would obviously favor that strategy too. But I don't have any faith in this team to draft a defensive tackle, Michelle. When have they chosen one that was good? Solomon Thomas stunk. Javon Kinlaw stunk. The other guy they took into Drake Jackson stunk. They've never taken a good one other than Nick Bosa, which was the slam dunk of all slam dunks. They didn't draft Eric Armstead. He was there when they got there. They didn't draft DeForest Buckner. He was there when they got there. So they really haven't shown any history of being able to actually choose good players at this position.
Well, that's also something that they're going to have to prove they can do, right? You can't just be bad at drafting, right? You can't keep your job after being bad at drafting. So prove to us you can draft some good guys. Like, I don't think it's fair to be like, well, I don't trust them to draft, so I don't want them to do that. Like, we have to trust the GM and Shanahan to draft correctly. I mean, or else what are we doing here? They're not going to win anything if all their drafts are bad. Like, yeah, they were stacked for a while. They had a couple good draft classes that had them stacked for a while. And now they have to rebuild that depth, or else they're just not getting far. Think about both the Chiefs and the Eagles this year. It's not like you can think of all these superstars on this defense, on either defense. It's just they have so much depth and they all play their role correctly. It's a good scheme. And there are a couple great players, like superstar names on both defenses. Well, really, I can only think of Chris Jones for the Chiefs, but it's about the depth around them.
We'll see which route the 49ers plan to go. Joe Tiz says, trade Brock 2 1s and a 3rd for Burrow. I would do that deal so fast, but I don't think that's going to be happening.
I love Brock, and I would do that deal in 5 seconds.
Yeah, Joe Burrow's, yeah, exactly. It is Valentine's Day, as we mentioned. I saw John Chapman put out this tweet. The funny outweighed the mean, so I'm going to throw it up. It's a picture of Kyle Shanahan. It says, I'll never abandon you like I do the run in close games. And it's like a Valentine's Day card with an excellent picture of Kyle Shanahan kind of looking like sad and lonely.
So what book were you reading yesterday that you tweeted about saying, after reading this book, I feel a little bit more worried about Shanahan moving forward?
That was the Mike Silver book. The Why is Everything is the title of the book. It's all about that Shanahan group of coaches: McVay, Saleh, Raheem Morris, Matt LaFleur. Mike LaFleur is in the book a lot. I did finish it. I did reach out to Mike. He's going to join me, but probably not until next month, unfortunately, because his schedule's a little crazy with the combine coming up, but he is going to hop on. But there's just a lot of stuff in there about Kyle. He seems incredibly difficult to work for and to work with. Like, it got so bad with Matt LaFleur. They were in Atlanta together, and they just decided, like, we're done. We're done working together. Even though it worked, the offense was great. Shanahan's last year in Atlanta, Matt Ryan won the MVP. Like, they were killing it. And it was still like so just combative between them that he was like, I'm out. I'm leaving. I got to go do something else. Like, I cannot work in this relationship anymore. Kyle just mother F's people over. At one point, he said to Chris Forrester on the headset, you don't talk anymore. If I need to hear something from the offensive line, the assistant offensive line coach talks. Now, eventually, like 5 minutes later, Forrester was talking to him again and it was fine. But like, that's a hard environment to work in.
I mean, and we see it just in his interviews, how stubborn he is, right? He's just very, very stubborn. And you can't say, it's hard to say, can you win a Super Bowl with Shanahan, right? Because it's like, well, they've been to 2 Super Bowls with him. He did have a 28-3 lead also as an OC with Atlanta in a Super Bowl. Like, he was there. He's there. You can win. If you've got there, you can win with him, right? And especially, like, they got to overtime against the Chiefs with Kyle Shanahan. It's just, how much harder does he make it for everybody?
And that's a fair question. I mean, look, it's not like every other coach that has ever won a Super Bowl is like perfect to work with and everything is fine, right? They all have flaws and things and challenges that you have to overcome. I didn't like that because you need good people around you. We always say like Shanahan this and Shanahan that, but it's a staff, man. You need a good staff around you. And if you have this reputation of being such a badass and a hard ass, it might be hard to acquire a good staff around you.
I do think it's good that Robert Saleh was willing to come back.
Yes.
Because if it was that bad, he wouldn't come back.
Well, here's a crazy thing about that. At one point, Kyle Shanahan went to John Lynch and accused Robert Saleh of insubordination. Like, literally, he's not listening to me. He's being insubordinate because Saleh pushes back on stuff. Like, Saleh's like, wait, I disagree. Why do you want me to do this? and Shanahan, like they butted heads a lot. So that's pretty crazy about how much they butted heads. And I think that is a good thing, like you said, but like I didn't realize it got to that extent where Kyle literally went to John Lynch and was like, this guy's not listening to me.
But yeah, like you did bring up the point that you think Salah being there will be good for Shanahan because he pushes him back. Like he pushes back on what he says. And I don't think Shanahan is the type of guy that needs yes man around him because he's his yes man. He thinks he is all holy God of football. He doesn't need any yes man. And I'm happy that he was also willing to bring in Salah, who he knows will push him, right? And not just be a yes man. So I think that's big on both sides.
Yes, that's the encouraging thing about this is like everybody knows what they're getting into. Salah knows exactly what Kyle's like to work with, and he was agreed to come back. And Kyle knows that Salah's going to give him crap, and he wanted him back, like wanted him to the point where they really gambled on being able to get him and potentially missed out on any good defensive coordinator. So that is a very good sign. That's the thing is like there's another story in the book where one of the assistant coaches, the guy who has to like laminate the play sheets and get him all situated the way Kyle likes him, was late because they were on the road in the hotel and like the printer in the hotel wasn't working. And Kyle like busted in the room and just mother effed this guy, just constant and was like texting him like, where are you? What the hell? Why can't you get this done? And so the guy came into the room where Kyle was and kind of like threw the play sheets at him, like, get off my back. Here they are. And so then Kyle follows the guy out of the room and just rips him to shreds and fires him publicly. He's like, we'll do this without you. You're done. And then 2 minutes later, Kyle comes back into the room, grabs the guy out of the room. They have a private conversation where they continue yelling, but eventually the conversation's over and the guy's not fired and everything is fine. So like, again, it all works out, but it's a stressful situation. You don't want to go into work where knowing like, hey, I might get fired at some point today and then have to maybe save my job after that.
Yeah, it sounds like guys have to probably walk on eggshells around them unless they feel very confident that they're not going to lose their job.
And the other thing about it is I've called Kyle Shanahan a football robot, and I completely stand by that even more after reading this book. Kyle has no value for or sense of the emotional part of coaching and the human aspect of dealing with people. Like they make a big point in the book of talking about Sean McVay and how McVay, really one of the best things he does is deal with people and motivate people. And, they come up with those slogans. The Rams slogan was we, not me. That was their big thing. Kyle thinks that is all like motivational speaker BS. He thinks it's irrelevant. It's stupid. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is the X's and O's, the players you have, the film study, and all that stuff. And it's just not true. Like the psychological component of football, the motivational component, it is a thing. Now, how big of a thing you think it is, okay, we can debate, but you can't ignore it completely. And it seems like Kyle does that.
The 49ers is an organization. It's sometimes hard to swallow because it does feel like more than other organizations, they really do treat these football players like just items and not actual human beings. And I don't love that about this team. I'll say that. It just always seems like such a struggle to just give these guys what they deserve. And I guess they end up paying them and getting it done. But it's just like it always just creates this emotional issue between the player and the organization before they can ever achieve anything. And the way that Shanahan puts guys in the doghouse when they're younger, I think it messes with their minds as well and can ruin their careers. So there's a lot of issues here in terms of that, but I think overall Shanahan is a good head coach. There's just things he could work on, and we know he's not going to because he is who he is.
It's so weird how like they'll be so combative with players in negotiations, but then Kyle will go to management at the 11th hour and like pound the table to get that guy, which is why Deebo ended up re-signing, why Trent Williams ended up re-signing, why Brandon Ayuk ended up staying. It's like, dude, just do that from the beginning. We could skip all the crappy parts.
You would think, or maybe Shanahan is just like trying to do it to like show face to the players. Like, see, I stepped up for you, even though like, why didn't you step up 6 months ago?
The weird thing is like in the book, the players love him. And even the coaches, like they marvel at like how good he is at all the schematic stuff and the details about how He knows how to literally coach every single position on the field, offensive lineman, wide receivers, quarterback, all of that stuff. So like there are like a lot of good things in there too. I don't want to make it seem like the book just dumps on Kyle Shanahan because it's not true. It's just I don't love that all of like the observations that we've sort of seen were confirmed even more and kind of like amplified by the details in the book. So that does scare me a little bit.
How many more years would you give Kyle Shanahan to win a Super Bowl before you were like, okay, we got to just part ways?
I mean, if they're going to the NFC Championship game all the time and the Super Bowl, I would say keep going.
If Shanahan misses the playoffs next year,
I wouldn't say fire him, but he'd be on the hot seat in 2026 with me, big time.
What if they win one playoff game over the next 2 years?
Then the next year he would go into like hot seat territory.
So you're not even close to hot seat territory.
No, absolutely not.
If he had another 6-10 season, you wouldn't be like, or what were they this year? 7 and 10?
6-11, I think.
11.
If then 2026 would be like, all right, dude, I need another deep playoff run. Otherwise, you're gone.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Would basically be it. I was checking the odds on the BetUS website, and in the NFC, chances to win the NFC, the 49ers are third, which is the lowest they have been in a long, long time. You've got the Eagles, number 1, plus 300, then the Lions, plus 450, then the 49ers at plus 800.
What's their Super Bowl odds? Because the last I saw was like plus 1,500, I think.
The Super Bowl odds, since you asked, they are plus 1,400.
Okay.
So it's Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles, Bills, Lions.
It's crazy the Ravens are tied for the second highest odds. Like, what have they shown to trust them to be Super Bowl champions? Way more than the 49ers. They're so far below them in odds. That's just wild to me.
That's fair. I didn't think of that, but you're right. Like the 49ers make deep playoff runs. The Ravens don't as much.
And we just saw the 49ers have a 6-win season and then come back to the NFC Championship the year after. So it's not like we haven't seen them bounce back from a terrible season of injuries. I think these odds are crazy compared to the other ones. Also, like the Bills haven't made the Super Bowl since what, 1993? The Lions, they've never made the Super Bowl, right?
Correct.
Commanders are right there with them, who have never made the Super Bowl, or no, they've won Super Bowls. Just kidding. Yeah. Bengals are right there. Never won a Super Bowl.
Bengals are pretty high considering they didn't even make the playoffs. All those either did the 49ers, I guess, but there's more playoff history with the Niners recently than Cincinnati. So
I guess the 49ers do have the highest odds among non-playoff teams. So I guess it's not that crazy, but I do think that's a really nice line.
So if you want to take that bet, of course, you can do it with BetUS. But if not, if that's not your thing, BetUS also has a casino. So if you like slots or live casino dealers, you can take advantage of BetUS. Amazing 200% sign-up bonus up to $5,000 or 250% for crypto sign-up bonus up to $5,000. Thanks again to BetUS. This comment from Benali I've heard too says, I read that book and thought Shanahan came out of it looking pretty good. A lot of people have said that to me too. Like I said, there is a lot of really good stuff in there. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was Shanahan has made a lot of changes throughout his coaching career in terms of how he even does the meetings. Like when he first started addressing the team in meetings when he was an assistant, he would sit in his chair with his back to the team and he would just stare at the video screen and he would occasionally like look over his shoulder at the team. Like he wasn't good at the human part of it, that
personal.
Sort of, yeah. And he got much, much better at it as he went along. He was, I think it was coaching on the sidelines, and then they asked him to go up to the coaching booth to see the game from like the aerial perspective when he was a coordinator. He's made a lot of changes. He's been open to making a lot of changes, but they've all been asked of him by somebody at the time that had more power, a head coach, a coordinator when Shanahan was a position coach, that type of thing. So that was encouraging that like he got presented with a change and was like, great, but he's not coming forward himself and making those changes. And now there is nobody with more power than him. So again, talking about Saleh and the pushback and why that's so good. It's great that he's open to changes, but someone's got to be there to push him to make those changes.
I think it'll be interesting. I think the Deebo situation will really open our eyes here if he's open to change, right? If he's willing, because he's going to have to be willing to trade Deebo Samuel. I think he's going to be the one deciding here, like, are they trading him or not? And if he's willing to trade him, I do think that's saying a lot about him, that he's willing to change up his system a little bit, because so much of this is focused around Deebo and his style of play and what you're getting from him. And I do think this would help him so much next year, keep defenses off guard, right? Especially to start the year. They're not going to know what it's going to look like without Deebo, because Deebo's such a big part of it. And you know exactly what Deebo's going to do, right? They know exactly how to defend Deebo. So that, and they just know how the offense is going to work. Without Deebo there in that position and just kind of wasting a player that's running 5 yards a route and like hoping that he can break a couple tackles, without that, it changes everything. And I would love to see him work without Deebo this next year. And I know last offseason I was on the keep Deebo train, but I was wrong. I'm going to admit it. Like, Deebo was not the guy to keep. And I wish they traded him last year when they could have got something for him, right? But I also think at the same time, then everyone would have said, oh my goodness, they fouled this year because they traded away Deebo, right? They can't do the system. Like, I'm almost glad that they kept him. They saw it's not working anymore, and now they move on, and they now know what to change.
Joe Tiz says, Eagles wing it all definitely added fuel to Kyle's fire. Kyle is going all in this year. I will say this after reading that book. Kyle and Sean McVay may be friendly, but they are not friends, okay? I don't think Kyle was invited to Sean McVay's wedding. They hate losing to one another. Like, they hate it to the point where at one point Sean McVay was like, we're done losing to that mother. Like, McVay celebrating in the end zone in 2021, I believe, when the Rams were up 17-0 at the final week of the regular season. Like, that's real. He hates losing to Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle hates losing to Sean McVay. Kyle told McVay, like, dude, I could barely watch the Super Bowl. I hated watching you win the Super Bowl. Like, there is a real legit rivalry there.
And now you have, not only have the Rams won a Super Bowl, the Eagles who, I feel like the players had the bigger rivalry there than the coaches did. But those players hated each other, and now the organization, the fan bases hated each other, and now they've won one. It's like, it's a lot piling up now. And it's like and also the worst part of the Eagles winning is like, we took down the beast that you could not. And I think that hurts even more, right? So there's a lot. I mean, they shouldn't need this motivation, right? You should just be motivated to win a Super Bowl anyways. But coming off of this year, I also think this should put energy into all teams across the NFL to say the Chiefs can lose. We do have a chance to win a Super Bowl. We see the evidence here with the Eagles. So I do think this gives hope to a lot of teams across the league.
They didn't just beat the Chiefs. They humiliated the Chiefs. I know Kansas City ended up scoring some BS points at the end. They dominated them. They were
up 35-0, right?
I don't know if it was 35-0, but it was not even close. It was an absolute destruction of the Chiefs. So, yeah, it does feel a little bad because the Niners were always either blowing leads or in a one-score game to Kansas City. So, yeah,
it was 34-0.
Yeah. So we'll see if Kyle and the Niners come out extra motivated. One last thing I wanted to get to. Matt Barrows had said that he thought the chances were greater than not that Talanoa Hufanga was gone from the 49ers. Well, Hufanga posted this on his Instagram yesterday, and it says, by the grace of God, year 4, with the praying hands emoji. And it's a picture of him as a child, cute kid, by the way, in a 49ers like outfit. He's got a 49ers shirt on. He's got the khaki pants. It looks kind of like the home uniform almost, to be honest with you. And then there's a bunch of there's a video of a highlight of him making a tackle. And there's a bunch of pictures of him in a 49ers jersey. And so I'm just wondering, like, does this mean he's coming back? Does this mean he's leaving? Because technically the last picture is him walking away from the camera. So I was like, I don't know if this is good or bad. And if he is coming back, like, is that really good or bad? Because it was a mixed bag with Hufanga last year.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you've had the big injury with him now, and he got all those interceptions for the first half of the 2023 season, right? He was coming up with all these turnovers. He is an inconsistent player, and you're going to have to pay him. Like, as a free agent, he's going to get paid. Not top market, but he's still going to get paid over probably above average for a safety. And you have to decide, is he worth that? And maybe right now, maybe he wants to stay in San Francisco. And that's why he's kind of putting this out here to be like, I want to stay here. Like, please keep me, kind of lobbying for it. But there are a lot of good free agent safeties. And the thing about safeties is they're not very expensive. So you can get some of the good guys and not overpay like drastically. But there's a lot of good ones out there, and Justin Simmons and Harrison Smith, and even young guys that have a lot of potential, and Javon Holland and Julian Blackman and Jeremy Chin and Justin Reed, who just came from, the Chiefs defense, or coming from the Chiefs defense. Like, there's a lot of options out there. And I don't think those guys are going to be paid all that much more than Hufanga. I kind of would rather go elsewhere.
Yeah, unless he wants to sign for crazy cheap.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't necessarily just hand him a starting job. So I would
Well,
say,
the issue is it wouldn't even be, we don't even know if Jair Brown should be a starter, right? Or Mustafa. So we don't even know if there is a starting safety on this team. So if Hufanga will sign for cheap, and then you bring in some other free agents and then let them all kind of battle it out to see who's the starters, I'm fine with that. But I don't think you can just go in saying, okay, we're going to re-sign Hufanga and then trust that Jair Brown or Mustafa can turn into a good starting safety. Like, they need to add here, and there are options that will not like kill your cap.
Safety is one of the positions, for whatever reason, like, the market is one of the lowest in the league, really.
Yeah.
So that's good. If you're going to have a need, have it at a position that's not too crazy expensive. So we'll see if Hufanga comes back. I just happened to see that Instagram post, and I was like, hey, that's rather interesting. Cynthia says, hi, Rob and Michelle, with the champagne emoji. I know you got your mimosa. That's well
almost
done.
Out of it.
That's how you can tell the show is wrapping up. That's Michelle's opinions get stronger and stronger as the show goes on, as the mimosa gets less and less in the glass. So that's where we sit with the 49ers right now. The Deebo thing, I wish they would just decide. They're going to have to, because he has an option bonus due on March 22nd. The Niners are not going to want to pay that. So, although I don't know,
I feel like the Broncos will send a 6th-round pick for him. I really do.
I had the Broncos as the number one spot for him, because I think Sean Payton would want to do things with him and could get him the ball. But again, then you have to decide, is the cap hit worth it all? But we'll see what happens with Deebo Samuel and Talanoa Hufanga and all of these guys, of course. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Please leave us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Pods, and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Michelle, I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you, as always, for hopping on the show with us. And just a reminder, check out the BetUS Casino. If you like slots or live casino dealers, take advantage of BetUS' amazing 200% sign-up bonus up to $5,000, or 250% for crypto sign-up bonus up to $5,000. It's Friday. I know you have plans. Plus, it's Valentine's Day, Michelle. What do you have cooking with your wife?
The thing is, I don't want to go anywhere today because it's Valentine's Day and it's going to be busy. So me and my wife go on dates all the time. Like, we don't need a holiday to tell us, but my wife does want me to take her somewhere. So I'm going to take her somewhere for something, dinner, drinks. I'll figure it out, but I want to go to a place that's not busy. Like, I hate busyness. I hate it so much. But then tomorrow we're playing foot golf, which I've never played before.
What the hell is that?
It's with a soccer ball, and I'm not good at soccer, but it's foot golf, and we're playing it with a group of friends, so that will be fun.
There you go. I actually have plans tonight. How about that? I'm taking my wife out for Valentine's Day. We're going to go out for dinner, and then we're going to go see Captain America, Brave New World. We love comic book movies and all that stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
Kids are sleeping at my mom's tonight, so we'll have the house to ourselves. It's going to be a nice little Valentine's Day.
Sounds like a great night.
See that? Once in a while, I decide to get off.
I wish the grandparents could take our 3 dogs.
3 dogs. My God. Michelle's running a zoo over there. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, y'all.